Welcome, everybody. One Fun Guy podcast is live in the studio tonight with my guest, Concrete Spew. Spew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself. Give us a rundown.
All right. Well, hey, Mark, thank you so much for having me, first and foremost. And yeah, so my real name is Joe, but I've come to be known as just Spew simply
I like it.
because thank you. I think, people associate like the channel with me and everything, and it's just easier to remember and stuff. So, yes, I've become known around here at least as Spew. So, but yeah, no, this is like this place I got here that I have bands come, and recently I had a couple people that promoters from like around here that put on all these great shows. There's really three of them that are responsible for the Richmond hardcore scene, but of course hardcore has everything else underneath it, so metal, punk, crust, even industrial. It's just a term that everybody uses around here to talk about like the scene and stuff. So yeah, it's where I spend my time when I'm on camera and stuff, and why not.
Nice. So, give us a little bit of rundown about the scene in Richmond, right? So, I'm from Chicago. We have a lot of bands that come through here. Obviously, every major act will hit the Chicagoland area. But I was talking about it with a guest a few months ago that we don't really have any homegrown Chicago metal bands except Disturbed are like our big one, right? We got a lot of hard rock. We got some like classic rock guys, right? But like as far as like metal goes, there's only like two or three that actually have come from Chicago that like say they're from Chicago.
Sure. Well, I've happened to I know a few. I've gotten to know a few through a friend of mine who lives out there. And these are more like on the underground side. Withered Soul is a sort of like death doom, although their latest album's like a little bit pace has picked up a little bit. Then there's Imminent Terror, which is really kind of like a sort of a thrashy, kind of like D beat at times outfit, terrific band. And then Storm Ruler's another one. Storm Ruler's like US black metal. Um Excellent band, great musicians. It has Jesse Schobel, who used to be in the band Scour with Phil
Yeah,
Anselmo and
right.
Tim, yeah. So I've gotten to know some of those, but those, you're right, those are more on the underground side of things. Richmond is thriving, and this is very new to me because I have only really in the last year or so ventured out to check out the scene. I've been in Virginia. It's been about 5, 6 years now. And I only went to the big shows. Like when I first moved here, like I went to see Obituary,
Mm-hmm.
I went to see Municipal Waste. I mean, Iron Maiden played at the Capitol Center. It's like our arena and everything. But I didn't go to a ton of like hardcore shows and everything. Well, I have in the last year. I've been going to more, and it really is very impressive the way it's run. I mean, I grew up in the Northeast, and the scene in the early 2000s was trying to think how I could describe this in a way that does it justice. It was in so many words, it was a scary place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people were and I mean everybody. People were not very friendly. They were out to get each other. I mean it was that type of thing. We all had our friends and stuff like that, but it was not the inviting kind of place. I mean, I would hear about all these tales of unity and all this kind of positive stuff from the big bands, Madball,
Mm-hmm.
Agnostic Front, all the big names and stuff like that. But I didn't witness that firsthand. When I was coming up, everybody was like every man for himself and everything. Richmond, however, is so far in the other direction that it's just such a beautiful thing to see. Everybody having a good time, the bands that all get along with each other, the promoters who love going the extra mile to make sure that the bands are taken care of and the shows move along and stuff like that, and that the venues are playing ball with everybody too. It's they really do a good job of vetting like the venues and stuff like that to make sure there's not sharks that are really trying to cut into to
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a promoter, so I don't really know a ton of what goes into like the money side of things. But the little that I do know has to do with yes, just the house itself, taking a cut from liquor that night. Well, of course,
Right.
because it's their bar and everything, but all those sorts of things. But it's very impressive around here. I mean, Richmond is thriving. There's a ton of awesome bands. Um, I've even heard about Lynchburg is a town a couple hours away from here. I don't think it's all that big. The population is not very large compared to like Richmond or Roanoke or something like that. But from what I hear, it's hopping out there too. A lot of
Okay.
great bands and stuff, a lot of cool people and everything like that. So yeah, when I started this place, my plan was to get the big bands in here because that's those are really the only people that I knew. I mean, not a ton, but the interactions that I had with bands, they were all nationally touring acts and everything. And then I thought about it. I said, look a little bit beneath the surface to see what's going on around here. And I did. And everybody has just been so cool and wanting to come on and everything. And the door is wide open for them and any
Right.
other band that's like touring up and down the East Coast that visits Virginia. One thing that's very interesting about it is that it's as far as the national acts go, it's very much hit or miss as to who comes here. If a big band is on tour, say like Sepultura, for example, okay? Sepultura, I was disappointed because I've never gotten to see them before. Even the most recent,
Mhm.
incarnation and everything.
Right.
They played Baltimore. So if you're a bigger band and you don't play Richmond, you play the Soundstage in Baltimore, or
Okay.
there's a couple other like bigger places like that. Or I don't know, I'll go with different Steel Panther or something like that, right? If they are gonna play this region, it's either going to be Raleigh, North Carolina, or Maryland. I don't
Okay.
know that they've done a Virginia date in a while. Maybe Virginia Beach or something like that. But you know what? You know who I got to give a lot of credit to? Crowbar.
Okay.
Crowbar, they have love for Virginia, and I'm so thankful for them because they're awesome. Eye of
Yeah.
God's awesome,
Now,
and
didn't Lamb of God do their live album in Richmond?
you know what? They may have. I never
I
really.
That was
I,
the record store day event one that they did live in Richmond.
okay, okay,
So
okay.
yeah. So that's
Do you happen to know the venue that they played at?
I didn't. I could probably find the album though,
Oh
and
no, that's
see.
cool. That's cool.
Uh,
I was just wondering because that's the other thing that's cool about Virginia too. I gotta say, or at least Richmond, the venues themselves structurally. I mean, down to the friggin' nails and the
right.
planks and the walls and stuff. Really cool. There's a place in Richmond called the Canal Club, and the way I describe it is like being in your friend's basement in the '80s when they got like the wood paneling and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But it's not poorly put together. It's a very comfy spot. And then there's a Broadberry, which is another really cool place and stuff. And then Banditos is a smaller one. That is a place for more local acts or even national acts that are
Mhm.
coming through that may not be like B League yet and stuff. But Banditos is terrific. This place, the Camel. I was just there for the first time a few weeks ago to see a couple bands, and the
Okay.
Camel, another excellent venue and stuff. So it's good. It's very healthy around here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like, so what we do, like, so for myself, when I go see a show, my thing recently has been recording it, right? Like,
Ah,
and you get a lot of grief because there's a lot of concert venues that don't want you to record and they don't want you. But I'm like, you're there, and those are how I get my views on TikTok, right? So like,
okay.
going live, I went live for Lamb of God, and I went live for Trans Siberian Orchestra. I went
Oh,
live for Buck Cherry. I went live for In This Moment. So there were a lot of bands that I kind of went live for, and that's how I kind of got my following with a lot of that. So with that being said, in the Chicagoland area, a lot of the venues, like you said, are old school, awesome looking buildings, but they're old now. They're falling apart and they're hard to maintain.
oh
So
wow.
we have a resurgence now. So we had a big company for about 75 years called Morton Salt, and they produced the majority of the salt in America, right? Came from
Oh yeah, okay. I
yeah,
know the
so
name.
Morton Salt, right? So the little girl with the rainbow with the salt, right?
Yeah.
So they knocked that down. They closed the salt plant and they built a concert venue called the Salt Shed on
Cool.
that land. And it's awesome. It's brand new, state of the art, sounds great. But Chicago still holds on to a lot of those vintage buildings, right? So we have like the Concord Music Hall, we have the Vic, the Riv. There's a lot of old school places that are kind of now on the verge of like needing huge makeovers, and the money's not really there. So we're into that little bit of realm. So like our big one is the Metro. That's kind of like our old one. That's where Metallica showed up. And the first 1,000 people got in. They just were. It was an unannounced show. They announced it at 7 in the morning. Said Metallica's playing. The line was a mile long within 30 minutes because the first 1,000 people got in for free.
Wow.
To see Metallica. Yeah, so they do.
That's nuts.
Yeah, so it's crazy. So we have Soldier Field right where the Bears play. That's a giant concert venue. We have Tinley Park. It's called Credit One now Amphitheater, but it was the Tweeter Center and World Theater. Back in the day. That's where kind of like a lot of the major bands come, and then Allstate's the other big one. So we get every major touring act coming through Chicago, but some of the ones will play the little local shows, like Steel Panther played the Forge in Joliet, which was awesome. It holds about maybe 500 people.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was sweet. Yeah, to see that. It was really cool. They played a one-off show there.
What about that place? I've been hearing a lot about this place, Reggie's.
Yeah, Reggie's Rock Club. So it used to be Riley's, and now it turned into Reggie's. We had the Elbow Room. We had the Viper, or the Viper Room and Empire, which were downtown. They were all small clubs, but a lot of like industrial goth bands would play there. So it was kind of neat. So Reggie's is kind of now becoming the like intermediate. So if you can't play, let's say Allstate, you can't sell out 25,000, but you can sell 1,500. Then you would go to like a Reggie's. So it's kind of nice.
I'm dying to get out there. There is a you were talking about like venues that maybe like old and but are still like up and running. I haven't been there yet, right? There's a place around here, and it's called Odin's Underground. Now, I asked people, a lot of the bands that I know and that have come through here have played this place, Odin's Underground. Now, I asked them, I'm like, can I talk about this place? Reason being is because it is one of those Ask a Punk sort of like arrangements where they are missing. I guess this is okay because I mean this place they have an Instagram, they have plenty of advertising and stuff like that. But my understanding of it is that they're missing certain licenses, and those licenses may have been held back just due to, I don't know, stupid stuff and everything. But the venue itself this is how it was described to me. It is an old warehouse / like industrial mine or something like that. You made me think of it when you said salt, and you go like it is literally underground, and you're in this sort of like kind of like the last scene of Terminator 2. You know that like that if you picture that, right? And to make matters even weirder, it is owned by the person who puts the shows on there, lives in a house, like basically like connected to it. So it's the weirdest damn thing you've ever heard of. It's like, someone's house, and they're like a cool person and everything. But yes, it is. They cannot put an address in their advertising because they're missing some sort of like licenses or this, that, and everything. But a lot of people love going there. And when you were describing some of, Chicago's venues, I was like, oh shit, Odin's Underground.
Yeah.
I've been hearing a lot about that.
So we actually had a venue like that back in the day. It was called Neo's Nightclub, and you would walk through a back alley and it would dead end. It's probably one of the most dangerous things to do, but you would have to walk through it, and you would go downstairs, and it was like Blade, right? When they go into that secret club, and in the beginning when he goes downstairs and it's all the vampires dancing, that's how Neo was. It was all goth. And like KMFDM played there, Ministry played there, back in the day, obviously, right? But it was just kind of unique because you'd walk into a back alley, you'd go through a doorway, and you'd be in like a little lobby, and a door would open, and you'd walk down into like this dungeon, and it was just the goth scene in there was huge. So so Chicago does have a lot of unique spots, but the thing that really holds Chicago back, like I said, is that just we don't have a lack of bands that come from here that we can kind of like call our own. Now I know like Born of Osiris is kind of a newer band. They claim Chicago as their home. They're, so we do have that. We do have like awesome musicians though, like Tom Morello, right? Went to Barrington. He Rage Against the Machine, right? Trent Reznor grew up in Schaumburg. Al Jorgensen was from Chicago, right? So we have a lot of acts, but they don't claim Chicago as their like base. They went to LA and they say, well, LA's our where we made it, so that's our home city. So we got a lot of musicians that come from here, but we, Chicago mainly I think is known for the blues, right? That's kind of
Okay.
so between Buddy Guy and who's the other one? The other big blues musician. Like they're from here, BB King, right? So
Oh yeah.
so those guys had their home base in Chicago, right? So that's where the blues kind of took over. That's what we're known for. So we're not really we have a metal scene, but it's not really like a metal scene. Like blues and jazz is kind of where Chicago kind of got its namesake from. So
Do you know one band from Chicago that are you gonna? Is this live or are you gonna edit this?
yeah, I'll edit it, but
Oh, okay. Because I don't even know if I can say that the name. It should be okay, but that band. I'll just say the acronym.
you could swear. I mean, I don't care if it's
The band LSD, which stood for Life, Sex, and Death.
okay.
Okay, so they never really made a whole lot of waves. I know if you saw footage of them, I know you would know them right off the bat. I first discovered them on Beavis and Butthead like years ago.
Yeah.
They were one of those kind of like when Guns N' Roses sort of like rebelled against hair and everything, and their sort of like look and sound was not so much like hair, but sort of that like it was that very very pre-grunge type of thing, but it was still very much like metal. Like you'd never get out of if you were to sit down with like Tom Morello or Lane Staley if he was still alive. I don't think he would ever say a band like Life, Sex, and Death was grunge in any way, but it was that kind of like all right, we're done with the hair metal thing. Guns N' Roses are on the Illusion era, seems to like know how to navigate the ship to not be labeled as like a hair band or something like that. So it was like if you liked the Illusion Guns N' Roses albums, the Silent Majority was the only album they did. But again, their gimmick was that they had this singer who was like homeless.
Okay.
And so he would show up on stage, looking and smelling like hell and everything. From what I heard, he actually was married to like some supermodel or something like that. This guy Stanley, and it came from a lot of money, But it's an awesome album, and they were from Chicago. Again,
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out.
Oh, you'd love them. I promise you'd love them.
So obviously, as far as like the 80s, like hair metal bands go, like Enough's Enough was from Chicago, right?
Oh, sure.
And they still tour today, right? The Fly High Michelle, and the guy still comes around, and they're awesome, right? But I mean, we had, Cheap Trick was kind of like the band, right? Cheap Trick and Styx were like the Chicago bands, right? Like, so that's kind of when you say Chicago, people are like, oh, Styx, Cheap Trick, right? That's kind of what they recognize as. So, like I said, in the metal scene, though, really, other than Disturbed, there was a band in the day called Flesh Grind.
Rich, yeah.
He passed away, but he kind of found religion and kind of quit the metal scene. But they were like the original hardcore, like death metal band.
Did he? I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, it was a very unique story. Yeah. So,
wow.
So he had a company that he would distribute the majority of the underground Chicago metal music. His company had all the CDs back in the day. So if you wanted them and you were a record store, you went through Rich. That's how you got the CDs, right? Cool. And so he had a guy named Bob that worked for him that was in another metal band from Chicago that never really kind of made it. But Flesh Grind was kind of like the band from Chicago that was kind of like the national touring underground death metal band, right? So they were kind of the band. But yeah, so Rich, he has all this success with Flesh Grind. They do the Live in Germany album. They're touring the world. He basically comes back, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if he got sick or something happened, but he pretty much moved to Michigan and became basically a born-again Christian and started teaching the gospel, kind of left the death metal stuff behind, and then he passed away, and that was kind of the last. But yeah, he kind of just walked away from the scene, but he was kind of like the guy that tied the Chicago metal, together with all the other bands from Florida and LA.
Cool. Wow.
So, yeah.
I
So
never
that's a cool
knew that.
story.
I never knew there was like a conversion or something like that. Wow.
Yeah.
What the hell? I mean,
right.
I want to say good for him, but I mean, he passed away. But if that was his path, big.
Yeah,
You know,
that
it was
was
cool.
yeah. So yeah, it was kind of unique. But like I said, Chicago just isn't really known for like their homegrown bands. But we just have such a nice scene here where all the acts come through. So like even the ones that are kind of like what you would consider has-beens or like what we have a really cool theater called the Arcada Theater. Ron Onesti runs it, and the Arcada will have every '80s metal band that once was the thing, like Warrant's coming to play. Jeff
Oh,
Tate
cool.
from Queensryche, right?
Oh,
He plays there a
nice.
lot. So you get a lot of bands like that coming through. Sebastian Bach plays there all the time. So it's just
Awesome.
kind of cool. Ron does a really good job at kind of keeping that alive. But, it's just difficult because it's, a lot of those bands at one time were selling out arenas. Now they can't. So it's kind of like they have to fit into their niche where you want to sell out maybe 500 or 1,000 tickets, but they can't sell out 10 grand anymore, right? They just can't put
Yeah.
10,000 seats into a place, right? So like it was really crazy because one of my favorite bands is Buckcherry, and
Okay.
they played arenas with Motley Crue and all these other big bands, and now when they tour on their own, they just can't really do it. But to see them is awesome. They play a 1,500 seat show, like no problem.
Oh
So
man.
yeah, so
Wow.
it's cool to see them.
Have you been to Las Vegas? I can't remember.
Yeah, I've been to Vegas.
Okay, have you been to the house? We were talking about like mind trip venues and the strange layouts, and you just mentioned something a second ago that made me think of it. The House of Blues inside Mandalay Bay in Las
Yeah.
Vegas. Oh my God. Like you talk about like that was one of the craziest experiences for me because I'm in Mandalay Bay, the casino. I love it. I love Las Vegas so much. I love Mandalay Bay and everything. And then it was who the hell did we? Yeah, it might have been I Hate God set that we went down to watch. But I just remember like Mandalay Bay is gigantic, like many of the other mega resorts there. And I go, you go down those stairs, and like all of a sudden, like this gigantic, like I mean, it's a House of Blues, so it's not enormous, but it's just still very
Hmm.
strange to
Yeah.
be in one giant place to then go down a flight of stairs and then you're underground technically and it just like opens the weirdest thing ever, but it works.
Yeah, and that's so like it's really kind of cool because who does a really good job at that kind of stuff is the Hard Rock, right? Because they're in every major resort around the world, right? You go to Mexico, you see a Hard Rock. You go to Jamaica, you see a Hard Rock, right? So they've kind of got the niche on the the rock and roll scene across the globe, basically.
Yeah.
And now they're hitting all the casinos, right? So the Hard Rock casinos
Man,
with the
I
music
gotta tell you,
venues are crazy.
I got heat with Hard Rock with and here's why, okay? My favorite place in the world, okay, was Mirage, right, in Las Vegas. Like
Uh-huh.
I loved Mirage. There was something so unexplainably like warm and inviting, Well, Mirage is now, of course, being rebuilt,
Right.
rebranded
Yeah.
as like Hard Rock and everything. Now, I'm beside myself. I'm so upset about that and everything. I loved Hard Rock when it was off strip. And
Hmm.
I loved it because, it was when you walked in, it was a little bit dimly lit. And so it was almost kind of like made for the rockers who didn't really want to be around, all the mania, the strip. They're maybe kind of strung out and everything. Like, all right, let's just go Hard Rock. It's off strips, a little bit more low key and everything. And I thought it was so cool. I thought it was like, this is perfect this is a perfect off strip brand. That's the only one I've ever been. Yes, that's the only one I've ever been to in the country. And then, that when they did away with that, and now it's Virgin and everything. And then I heard, now we got Hard Rock on the strip, and I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
man, just
And
but
the thing, like, so the Hard Rock, right? They obviously have their market where they're at, right? But Vegas, right? It's hard to compete with the residencies, right? Because when bands have the residencies, it's difficult to get around them because Def Leppard did theirs, Guns N' Roses did theirs, Motley Crue did theirs. You get a lot of these bands coming through, and now you got the Sphere, which is taking over. I don't know where the Hard Rock fits in because, like, unless they get these major acts that are going to come through there, most people are going to go see the big bands at the Sphere, right? They're trying to get Metallica there to do, a 2 week, stint where they're going to be playing every night at the Sphere, and they're going to sell hundreds of thousands of tickets, and throughout that course of the couple weeks, right? So I don't really know where that fits in, right? Because you still have the residencies and all the other hotels that a lot of these bands want to seek, right? you know, and a lot of these country acts are coming out there now, right? Jason Aldean opened a bar out there. The Red Dog just opened up. That guy that's married to Gwen Stefani, his stuff.
Oh
is
yeah,
here
yeah,
now.
Blake
Blake
Shelton, I
Shelton,
think.
yeah, that he opened up one out. So I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird to see where the Hard Rock will have its place other than just a casino like they do everywhere else.
I could not agree with you any more fully, and I think it's because everybody always says, right, like people that support Hard Rock on the Strip, their automatic response to people that don't like it is they say, well, you should see the one down in Florida. It does great down there, which I have no doubt that's actually the case. But it's sort of like, what competition is there in Florida? You know, I
Yeah,
mean, like, it's just, of course it's going to do well because, like, what does it have to compete with? Vegas, from what I've been hearing, because I have family there, Vegas is trying actively to attract a younger crowd. And the market research has told them that places like Fontainebleau and Resorts World and the sort of like non kind of like destination theme type like hotels and everything, their research has said that no, that's what the kids want and everything. So like, if that's the case, I can't see the Hard Rock thriving because it's like, you're if I'm 21 years old, okay, I don't know that I'm going to be all that um psyched up to see black and white murals on the wall of musicians who I don't know who they are, like Roger Daltrey's like stage worn codpiece or something like
right.
that,
Yeah,
in a glass case. It's like, I'm 21. I don't know who wore that. I don't, it's not, doesn't look cool to me, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't really know what they're planning to do. So we'll have to see. I think it was such a travesty because Mirage had all the elements to its theme to make an awesome restoration.
yeah,
What's that word I'm looking for? Renovation.
yeah.
I think, I mean, it was perfect for like to take advantage of a lot of the new holographic
Sure.
technology and all that sort of stuff. But
You
I
know,
don't know.
and they had the Beatles Love, which was like one of the longest running shows that like
Yeah.
everybody wanted to see that, right? And you know, the thing that you mentioned that kind of hits home with me and resonates a lot is that market research on a 21-year-old kid isn't going to show very much because they don't want to leave their house,
Oh,
right?
that's true. I didn't even think of
It's
that.
it's a different era of kids these days, right? They don't want to be out in public. They don't want to be in crowds. They don't want to be like when I was 19 years old, going to concerts was the thing to do, right? You know,
Yeah.
you went to festivals, right? All day long, sweating, drinking, having a good time, right? These kids don't want to leave their house.
That's true.
So
I forgot.
it's
true.
so weird that like their market to these 21 and 22-year-old millennial kids that don't want to even go to Vegas. They'd rather watch it on YouTube than to get up and take a flight and go see a show, right? So it's
Wow.
very hard that like a market would have their place with a kid, right? Now, fathers and mothers that raise their kids on rock and roll, right? Well, the kids will grow up and understand what's happening, right? But that's so few of parents these days, right? They want their kids to find their own music, right? And their own thing, right? When I was a kid, my mom had the oldie station on, right? So
Mine too.
right. So it was Elvis, the Beatles, Richie Valens, the Big Bopper, Buddy Holly, all these old school guys, right? Over and over and over again, right? So as I started developing an ear for music, that's what I grew up on, right? And then my dad had the whole Italian side of things, right? So Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, right? That's all that was playing on both sides of the spectrum, right? So as I grew into my own, the only course of music that made sense to me was like the 80s hair metal. That's what I grew up on, right? My first album that I ever bought was on cassette, which was Slaughter, Stick It To Ya. We were in Lake Geneva, me and my cousin. Yeah. He got Dr. Feelgood and I got Slaughter, Stick It To Ya. And that was kind of it. So, and the first album I ever bought on my own with my own money, I begged my parents because remember NC-17 was a big thing back then, right? Was Appetite for Destruction. I bought it at Montgomery Ward. Yeah. My mom, I think I was 11 or 12. And the guy was like, I can't sell this to you. I'm like, so I went and got my mom, like, can you buy this for me? She's like, what is it? I'm like, the Guns N' Roses. She was like, okay, fine. So we bought it and that was it. So
You got it at Montgomery Ward?
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Man.
it's
That
crazy.
is awesome.
Yeah. When
That's
they
so
used to,
cool.
that like in our mall, J.C. Penney's on Montgomery Ward had music sections. So you would have that little area right before you went into the main mall. It was like maybe a 10 by 10 booth. And they had all those CDs in there. And that's when CDs were $40 a pop. right?
Yeah.
You know, they were $39.99, $42.99. Like they were expensive. And I remember I bought the Guns N' Roses CD. It was right around like Thanksgiving time, and I didn't have anything to play it on. So for Christmas, I asked for a boombox, and I got a Sony where the speakers kind of there was a button you would press and they'd slide in and click, so you could
Oh,
carry
nice.
it, and then or you could take it apart and move the speakers over. And that's what I got for Christmas. So I was actually able to listen to the CD because I couldn't. I had a CD with nothing to listen to it on.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That is, oh man.
So yeah, so it's just, but you know, it's just weird because like the kids these days, like you go to a metal show and you get to see like a lot of the people that are there, they're our age, and they're you don't see many young kids at a show anymore, and it's kind of like I think it's a dying art form, honestly, to get kids out to a show. There's only a handful of them that want to do stuff. Most of them, like I said, don't want to go out into big crowds. They have all this anxiety. They don't want to be around people, and it's like it's a shame. But unless there's a resurgence, I think that a lot of the stuff now is going to be virtual. You know,
Yeah,
they're just
it may be in some cases it may be region specific because I've seen a lot of like younger kids at these small shows around here, and but I agree with you that as a culture, I mean as a culture, you're right. I mean the truth is that the kids don't want to go out to these bigger shows and stuff like that, but for some reason, whatever reason, at least at the small kind of like quote unquote underground local level, I've witnessed a lot of younger kids, and I when I was growing up, I would hear older people talk about like, you don't want to be that guy that's going to the shows and he feels old and everything. I felt like that for the
yeah.
first time, like you know what I mean, a couple
I
weeks ago.
and so I'll tell you what. A couple weeks ago, well, a couple weeks ago, I went to see A Killer's Confession, right? And so about a year ago, right around um, probably November of 25, I went to see Mushroomhead, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
I couldn't believe the amount of 11 to 14-year-old kids wearing Mushroomhead masks on their dad's shoulders,
Oh,
watching the
wow.
concert, like rocking out. And there's a great picture where there's a kid and he's got kind of like he had the old mask on, like the old school style mask, and it was stitches with the ears with the wiry thing on top. And so he's got the mask on, and he's probably, I would say, 11 or 12. He's on his dad's shoulders, and Jackie reaches out and like grabs him, like, and tries to like pull him up on stage, but he was like stuck to his dad. But that's like the only time I've seen a young kid at a show, and it
That's
was at
funny.
Mushroomhead of all like things. I will say this: Pantera did have a lot of younger kids there, though. That was kind
Oh,
of cool to see, right? So, Amon Amarth opened for him, and when Pantera took the stage, I think Zach Wild kind of has that emulation with the younger audience, where he kind of breeds the young kids to come in, pick up guitar, play a guitar, kind of, because there were a lot of preteen kids at Pantera, which was good to see. That was like one of the few shows where it was like, wow, this is kind of like there's people in their 60s and their 50s and their 40s, 30s, 20s, and teenagers, which was cool to see because usually you don't get that at many shows. Pantera was one of the few that I actually saw a younger set of kids, which was awesome.
I had such like a moment at the last when I saw them in 23 in like the fall of 23 in up in New Hampshire where I used to live, and it was, you talk about like however you want to describe it, mind trip. Like I'm still trying to like piece it all together what I witnessed. Um, I saw people at that concert, right? At my age, the last time that I had seen them was in '99 when Pantera played. The only other time I've seen like OG Pantera was when they played with Black Sabbath. It was 1999, and I remember specific people because I knew who they were and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
like at that show, they were all, it was like, the question was like, what drug are they not on right
Right.
now? Like that type of thing. I mean, just blasted. And then seeing them years and years later at this incarnation with children, I mean,
Yeah.
these were some of the classic cases where you said, all right, that person's got two avenues, death or jail, that type of thing,
Yeah.
right? And then seeing them being like, oh my God, the last time I saw like, that person, I could name names and everything, was at that Pantera show in '99. And then seeing
Yeah.
them again with children. It's like,
Yeah, it's awesome, right? Because like I was very lucky because Pantera was always one of my favorite bands.
yeah,
So I got to see them in their first like '98 era when Phil still had kind of like the shaved head. And then
okay,
I got to
wow.
see them in the '99 era where it started to get a little bit longer. Then I got to see them in 2001 where it was the full on long hair, beard,
Oh,
Morbid
nice.
Angel and Soulfly open for them. And then I got to see them again on Ozfest. That was the year that Sabbath played for the first time with the original Sabbath guys back
Oh,
in
yeah,
it
yeah.
was I think it was '02 or '01. It was the Ozfest where they reunited. So
Okay.
Pantera played right before them. So the last two shows of the night were Pantera, Sabbath. And so like seeing the iteration of Pantera and then like obviously all the stuff that happened, it kind of sucks because like I have like a really kind of like hard hit home with Pantera in Damage Plan because I was supposed to see Damage Plan in '05 before Dimebag died.
Oh,
He
man.
got shot in Ohio and he was supposed to play Chicago on that Friday. And so
Ugh.
he didn't make it. And they
Ugh.
did the Pantera tribute in Chicago and they honored the Damage Plan tickets. If you had it for the show, you could go and
Wow.
see it. And it was awesome because it was like a who's who of everybody in heavy metal came to Chicago to honor Dimebag. The literally a couple nights after so Vinny played drums and it was David Draymond, Dave Mustaine, Chris Cornell. I mean, you couldn't imagine the amount of musicians that were in but if you had the tickets for Damage Plan, which I did, they honored it. And so it was a
Wow.
cool, like bittersweet experience because obviously everybody was there to see Dime and they didn't do it. But that Friday night show was kind of like the tribute to Dime and everybody who was anybody flew into Chicago and was playing. So it's kind of like, going to see Sabbath in London, right? Right before Ozzy died, right? It was kind of that way. Everybody flew to Chicago to pay tribute to Dime. So it was kind of a neat experience. It's kind of,
Oh man, wow, that is
yeah.
I never knew that about the honoring,
Yeah,
that's
it was awesome. It was
insane.
one of the coolest things to see. It was really neat.
That's
So
insane.
yeah, and like I said, Pantera's always been my favorite band, and I actually my buddy Mike got me into them. I was a freshman in high school, and I was in the senior locker room, and they were playing it, and I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard anything like that before, and that was the first time that I ever like heard Pantera, and I
Oh
was
man.
hooked on it. It was Vulgar Display of Power. It was awesome, and that was so I was a Pantera fan ever since. And
Oh shit,
so
that's
yeah, so
so
to see
awesome.
the reiteration of it, I was very like torn if I wanted to go, and I'm glad I went because they do honestly pay. Obviously, you could attest to seeing them. They do pay tribute to the brothers, which is awesome because that was like I was kind of nervous to see like how they would do it. It was awesome, right? So I loved every second of it. I'd go again.
Yeah, like I hear I hear both sides and everything. I was psyched upon the news and everything, but my view on it is that like knowing the stage show that they have been using, and it's so bombastic and it is so leveled up from what they could come out and just play to a bare stage, and that's all they would need to do. Everybody would have a good time, everybody would lose their shit and everything, but
Yeah,
they really brought a Kiss sort of presentation and stuff like that. So the way I look at it is like, if you're not into the idea because you just don't agree with it and everything, I just see it as like, why would you want to deprive yourself of a really exhilarating visual experience and stuff like that. But I don't know, I guess some
yeah,
people that
and it
doesn't
was
matter and
awesome,
stuff.
right? Because back in the day, right, when you saw Pantera back old school, right, like circa '99, 2000, 2001, all it was 20 Marshall amps stacked up on each side of the stage next to Vinny with pyro. There wasn't really any lasers or anything like that, right? It was just so incredibly loud and awesome. And then the fire matching the guitars and drums was awesome. That was kind of their thing, right? So now they incorporate the lasers and all the other stuff into it too. But like back in the day, they were like as raw as you could get, right? They were just kind of cool. They came up, they didn't need the stage show because they had the musicianship, right? It was so incredibly awesome to see that. So that was the coolest thing about Pantera back in the day is they didn't need any of that stuff, right? All
Oh
they needed was
man.
the pyro and the sound, right? It was awesome to see it just because it was them, and they didn't need any more. It was really cool.
Ah man, that's so cool. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm glad they're doing it, and I'm glad they're doing it the way that they are, because it really does give you, you know, if you're not, let's say it's perfect for, like, say, the husband who loved him back in the day, and now he wants to bring his wife, who maybe she's not really much of like a metalhead and everything, but I can't imagine that, like, you know, she would go to it and not be pretty blown away
Yeah,
by
it's
what
a
you're
cool
witnessing
thing.
on
Yeah.
stage, you know? So it's just, I think they've, and that is one of the reasons why I don't have much of a problem with it. I'll put it this way. I understand that the very expensive ticket prices these days. Okay, I understand it. It's because, you know, the physical product is gone and everything. They got to make up for it some way. But you really get your money's worth with a lot of these
Hmm.
big tours. I mean, you go see Maiden, and Maiden, you know,
Yeah.
blows you away. Kiss always did it, but I mean,
Sure.
Pantera is a great example. They could have come out, played, you know, to a bare stage and everything, and it would have been perfectly fine. Everybody that loves Pantera would have had such a great time, but they didn't. They really
Hmm.
made the ticket price worth it. And I mean, I went to the Motley Crue Def Leppard tour a couple of years ago, and yeah, I mean, I paid out the ass for the ticket. But if I was not just totally floored by
Right.
all the stage fixtures and stuff like that, so it sucks that the prices are what they are these days. But at least the bands aren't skimping on,
Right.
you know, what you're getting to see and stuff. You
Yeah.
know. Let me
No,
ask you this: you would
yeah.
know the answer to this. Oh my! I've been dying to ask somebody this personally, because you're about my age and everything, so you would know this. Do you remember at all? Say, oh shit. Did you probably waited in line for tickets and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
I think I know where you're going with this because back in the day we used to have to go to Carson Perry Scott to get tickets. You couldn't order them online. You had to
Like a
go to a
department, is that a
store.
department store?
Yeah, department store.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
People
me too.
would,
Yeah, we'd go to Macy's.
yeah, people would line up because you couldn't buy tickets. Like there was no online. The
Right, right, right. Yeah, no, I had a bunch of those experiences too. My problem with the current state of the live concert, you know, ethos, whatever the hell you want to call it, is that, like, they will announce a really big tour. Okay, great package. You know that it's going to
Mhm.
be an expensive ticket and everything, but the announcement is very, very shortly before the on sale date. So in that time, you have like virtually no time if you have to move money around or save or something like
Mhm.
that. When I was coming up, I always remember hearing the big tour announcements like months in advance of the on sale date. You'd hear it on the radio, wherever it was, and I don't know, something changed where it's like nowadays you'll see an article, whatever, announcing, oh, okay, Amon Amarth, Pantera, you know, King Parrot, whatever the package is, right? And that will go over the news wire on like a Tuesday, and then it'll say like tickets on sale this Friday. So you've got basically no time to
Yeah.
come up with $400 and everything. Like if you need to, you know what I'm saying? Like that's
Yeah.
my problem
I
with the industry.
and I think today the way that it is because of the social media presence and the online presence for a lot of these things, right? I think that it's kind of almost works to the fans' favor because if you put it out weeks in advance, you know that every broker is going to try and buy tickets first
That's
and
true.
then
That's a
sell
good
them on the
point.
secondary market. At least now they give you an announcement on a Monday, say the tickets are going to go on sale on Friday. But if you pre-register with the band's website, you get the first pick of tickets. So that's what I did with Guns N' Roses, right? So I went to Guns N' Roses website. I put my email address in. I signed up for the pre-sale, and it sent me a link. And it said Friday morning at 9:15, click on this link, and it will directly take you to the pre-sale Guns N' Roses at 9:15 in the morning before they go on sale live at noon. So
Nice.
that's how I was able to get my ticket. Now I did pay out of the ass for Guns N' Roses, and I'm ashamed to say how much I paid for it, but I always said that if Guns N' Roses ever came back to the U.S., they did once pre-COVID, and they canceled the tour during COVID. They
Yeah.
came back right after COVID, and the tickets were just so abysmally insane. Then
Mhm.
they went to Europe, South America, and Asia. Now they're back in the U.S., and I told myself, listen, whatever it costs, I'm going to pay, and I did. and I
Nice.
paid up. But I was very lucky back in the day to see Velvet Revolver, right?
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
I was able to see that show, which was awesome. So I did always say that if Guns N' Roses came back around, whatever it cost, I would go, and it cost. So,
Oh
but at
man.
least I'm going, so I got that coming in
Yeah,
July.
it's so funny about like the ticket prices from, let's say, even 10 years ago, when the Reformation, whatever you want to call it. I don't call it a reunion, but Slash and Duff back in the fold and everything. When that first got announced, I was very upset because the first date, if you remember correctly, the first announced date was Coachella.
Hmm.
And I knew, I was like, I can't. Everybody knows Coachella is
Right,
is so damn expensive and everything. I was just getting myself like back together and stuff after being like unemployed for a year and everything. I'm like, God damn it! I'm like,
right.
I can't. So I was all upset about that. Then I found out, this is such a roller coaster of emotions. Then after Coachella had already, did the tickets go on sale yet? I don't know if no, an announcement went out saying actually the birth date is going to be in Vegas. I'm like, oh my God! I'm like,
Yeah,
that I can do. And I could do that because I just got this brand new credit card, right? It was, my God, this is so embarrassing to say. Okay, it was one of those credit cards made for like if you had a little bit of trouble in the
yeah,
past with credit.
right.
Okay, so it was one of those. The limit was $300. Okay, so $300 credit one. You brought them up credit card, right?
Yeah,
I had just gotten it, okay? And then I'm sitting at work and yeah, I see the announcement. Did they whatever the announcement was before, I don't remember. All the long story short, I took that card and I'm like, yep, the tickets are like I think
yeah,
280 something or other. Swipe it, and bought the ticket and put myself back in the hole that I was getting myself out of. But that was awesome. So it was sort of seeing the first show back with
yeah.
Slash. However, if you also remember, the day or two before the Vegas show, it was they did the show at the Troubadour.
Hmm.
So it was like, God damn it! I thought I was going to see the very first
Right.
show back with Slash and Duff and everything, and instead the Troubadour show happened and everything, and like, but I don't know, it was cool. I guess I got to I saw the first arena show back
Yeah,
again,
right.
and you
And
know,
that's the thing, right? Like, I will say this about a lot of those bands, right? That we talked about it, a couple of nights ago about the LA scene, right? A
yeah,
lot of them don't really forget where they came from, which is cool about that, right? Because you'll have Motley Crue, they're one of the biggest bands in the world, and they played a show at the Roxy, right? They had I think it was 500 tickets, and the first 500 people got in to see them, and it went viral, and it was like a big thing, and it was recorded all over, and it was kind of, but at least they do that, right? They kind of go old school, and they kind of remember their roots, right? Because a lot of bands forget where they came from, right? They make
sure,
it big, and then they're all about the money, and they're all about the fame, and then and it's always just kind of neat to see like those 80 bands that just kind of remember the grind and go
yeah,
back
yeah.
to their roots, right? It's kind of cool to see, right? So yeah, you might have seen the first arena show at Vegas, but like for them to even go back to the Troubadour or the Rainbow and play a show
That's
is
insane.
awesome, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's where
yeah.
they got their start, right? That's where they grind their teeth, right? It was kind of, so it's kind of neat that a lot of those bands still kind of go through, and I think that's the power of LA, right? Going
Yeah.
to the Sunset Strip and seeing a show, right? That's kind of the ambiance because who was on that stage in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 70s, in the 60s, right? The Jim Morrisons and the Doors and like all those bands, and then Lemmy in the 70s, and all those like the history of the people that have been in that place. And I think that's kind of the ambiance is what's awesome, right?
It's almost like CBGBs and on the
Yeah,
East
right.
Coast,
It's
that
like,
type of
yeah,
thing.
any other old school show, venue where that these were the bands that played there before they broke big, right? Before they were, the Doors were playing the LA Coliseum, they were at the Whiskey and the Roxy and the Rainbow, and they were the Sunset Strip band, right? you
Yeah.
know and then all the other bands that came after them, right, that were playing there, the Stones and Zeppelin, and they all started there, right? They all got before they went big, right?
It's always funny to see like bands in later decades playing at, okay, so like for instance, I saw a picture of like outside the whiskey, might have been the Whiskey, but it was for like Fear Factory, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of like you know, you don't normally picture those bands playing. You picture Warrant, you
Yeah.
picture Britney Fox and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it's like, but to see in later decades bands that you wouldn't associate with Sunset Strip, but they're playing there and stuff like
Yeah.
that. You know, and it's just like it's pretty cool to see that despite the flavors changing, I mean the live venue itself stood, you know, on its legs and everything, and it's still
Yeah.
accommodating for bands in general, you know.
It's really cool to see. And the thing is that all those bands all started, at places, right? Everyone started at a small club, right? Unless you're one of those put together bands where
Oh yeah,
you're
yeah.
kind of like, you're just going right from nothingness to arenas. But most of them cut their teeth at small venues and played for 50, 60, 70 people when nobody knew who they were on a Tuesday night, right? And then 3 years later they're the biggest band in the world and you're like, we see these guys, back in the club, right? And like I said before, the only band that I can remember saying that to in Chicago is Disturbed, right? They used to play the Metro on Thursday nights for $6, and you'd hear their entire set. And this is when David Draymond's wearing just, he looked like he walked right out of Aeropostale, right? He had, the denim, shorts and the cargo shorts with a t-shirt. He wasn't in the leather and the cape and all the other. This was just four dudes on stage rocking, and their sound was awesome, and then he gets, the piercings, and then they become Disturbed, and that's kind of what the world knows them as. But we saw them when they were just four dudes on stage wearing jeans, right?
Well,
No
it's so
costume,
crazy to
no
think
any.
about it.
Yeah, it was just so it was kind of neat to see that, right? So that's kind of my era. We had them. They were like the band that you got to see. They were like the house band.
Wow. I didn't know it till years later, but I guess I saw the very first live performance for Black Dahlia Murder.
Mm-hmm.
It was in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I was living out there at the time at this place, Mr. Muggs. Cool place, like
Yeah.
home to like a lot of like small bands and
Right.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I found the flyer years later. I was like, oh shit, that's right. I went to that out in Ipsy and everything. And I don't remember who posted it. Maybe it was someone in the band or something, but the caption very clearly read like, yeah, this is Black Dahlia's first show. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, wow, they ended up being like a really big band and
Yeah.
everything. And like they were different. I never really got into them, but I got their very first EP at that show, and it's a lot different than any of their major releases that I
Yeah.
understand them to sound like and everything. And I liked that a lot. I liked that first EP. It was terrific. Very raw, very I guess I shouldn't fairly compare it to like the rest of their catalog because I haven't heard it,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's
They've
cool.
changed, right? Because they kind of came in that weird kind of era where the death metal scene had already happened and the hardcore scene was kind of evolving, and there wasn't really a fit for them, right? You had the Black Dahlia Murder, the Dillinger Escape Plan. You had a few bands in that kind of vein where nobody kind of knew what it was, and it was just loud and noisy and kind of, and then they kind of came into their own, I think. But they were one of those bands that were just kind of like in that you didn't really know where they fit. There was a few bands like that, right? You had God Forbid, Sworn Enemy, right? Shadows Fall before they got big, right? They were just kind of like post-hardcore, but there was no real title for that kind of stuff. It was more
Right.
like noise mixed with like blast beats, mixed with like there wasn't any type of cadence to it. It was just kind of all over the place. And then that's what became popular, right? It was like static at that point, right? And then a lot of bands started emulating that sound, right? And then went into like more defined kind of rhythmic pieces. The Black Dahlia Murder, they were all over the place, right? They kind
Yeah.
of took that crazy sound and just kind of made it work.
Oh God, like that! It never has there been a more clear example of what you just described than that EP. What a horrible night to have a curse, I think it was called. And yeah, that would have fit perfectly on stage with the first Shadows Fall. I mean, even All That Remains was kind of like that. Like with their very first release. I remember there was a oh Christ! I saw them in 1998. Back when actually, wait a minute. It was the hold on. No, I'm sorry. Okay, Shadows Fall. If you remember, Shadows Fall with the singer Brian Fair.
Yeah.
Wait. How am I? Wait, All That Remains. Okay, the singer of All That Remains. I might be messing this up or swapping something like this, but I think like Shadows Fall was originally fronted by the All That Remains singer, or maybe it was like the other way. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. All That Remains, that singer was in Shadows Fall, and like the beginning and everything, and then like
Yeah.
they swapped and stuff like that. But yeah, that sound I remember very clearly, like, you know, learning about and being, you know, very very mystified by in like 2000, 2001 and stuff, because you had Overcast was another one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Overcast.
Overcast was Brian Fair's first band.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, awesome. But I think that was what you're describing, though. Is that kind of like, it's not hardcore. It's definitely not. It's not death metal either. But it's this strange marriage of the two, and I
Yeah.
thought it was cool. I loved Overcast. I
And
thought
it's
they were
so
terrific.
weird, right? Because like you mentioned these bands, right? So like I'll tell you a band that opened for all of these bands and probably became the biggest one was Killswitch.
Oh,
Because I
sure,
thought
sure.
Killswitch opened for Shadows Fall,
Yeah.
and 2 years later, Shadows Fall was opening for Killswitch, and Killswitch is blew up, right?
Right,
But
right.
a lot of those bands, because they didn't have a genre to fit into, I remember. So God Forbid is one of my favorite bands, right? They kind of had that like hardcore, omnious, in your face. They opened for Cradle of Filth in
Oh, wow. Okay.
2001, right? So you have a hardcore band opening up for one of the most catastrophic black metal bands, right, of all time. They didn't fit on the same bill. God Forbid just didn't fit with Cradle, but they brought it. And a lot of the Cradle of Filth fans became God Forbid fans. I was one of them because I was like, who is this band, right? They come out on stage. There's two twins. They're identical twins, Doc and Dallas Coyle. The singer's black, the drummer's black, and the bassist kind of looks like hillbilly, right? They were the most weird, eclectically looking band in the world, right? But man, they brought it that night. It was like a lot of people that went to see Cradle of Filth became God Forbid fans. I was one of them, and I
I
think
can understand that.
that was 01, 02, and that was right when Danny started doing the stuff with the drill, where he would bring like the saw with the metal plate and he'd start sparking all over. It was kind of the like first era. No women in the band at that point, no female singer. It was just them doing their kind of chaotic thing. They were trying to follow Demu and how they were kind of being so obnoxious on stage with the lighting, right? Cradle kind of didn't really have it at that point yet, you know, and Demu did. So it was just kind of really obnoxious, but that was one of the coolest shows. But it was so weird because it was like three hardcore bands and Cradle of Filth and God Forbid just stole the show.
Yeah, that is a weird pairing. You talk about like bands being like, you know, the odd man out, and you brought up Disturbed. The one and only time I've ever seen Disturbed was, I want to say it was, it might have been 1999.
Mhm.
And because I went to see Danzig, it was the Danzig tour where it was okay. Local Converge was the local opener who I loved for years. Like Converge opened the
Mhm.
show. Then I believe the tour was billed as Danzig with 6 Feet Under, and those were like the two like headliners
Yeah.
and stuff. So I mean, I went for Danzig and 6 Feet Under, and so Converge came out and was just absolutely insane. Then Disturbed had to play between Converge and 6 Feet Under, and the crowd was not kind to them.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's
at all.
probably, and so in 99, that probably version of Disturbed is probably they're not in the 2001 era or the 2002 era Disturbed, right? Because the album probably at that point I don't think broke out yet, right? So you probably saw Disturbed before they were a nationally known band. They were probably not even, they probably were just a local like Chicago band, right? I don't know if they were even in their era at that point yet.
I don't. I'm trying to think. I remember when I heard Disturbed on the radio. After that, I was like, oh, I remember some of these songs that they played, like some of the singles, and I remember it's like, oh man, I remember I heard that band play that live and everything, you know. And yeah, it's just crazy
Yeah,
that
because
you
it's
know,
crazy, right? Because when you look at the first Disturbed album and you open the liner notes, David Draymond was wearing a white Dago tee in jeans with black boots, and he had those big labrae piercings, right, from his lip. But that was the original, like Disturbed. Like people know him now as the costume and the cape and the leather, and he wasn't wearing any of that stuff when
Oh, that's
he was in a
funny.
white T-shirt, right, white Dago tee, right, what you know. And that's like what people don't remember about Disturbed is that, like I said, when they were playing in Chicago as like the Metro House Band back in the day, they looked like four regular dudes, right? They weren't in the costumes or anything. Draymond was in. He used to play a lot in shorts and flip flops.
Wow.
That was kind of the thing, right? Like I said, it looked like he just walked right out of Aeropostale or any one of those packed Suns in the malls, right? Just like a surfboard on his thing with literally, cargo short cutoffs with all the strings hanging and flip flops, right? That was kind of the outfit of the day, right? For most of the yuppie kids, right? And that's what he was wearing. It wasn't a costume. It wasn't, a big thing. It was just, like I said, four dudes playing. It was.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, oh man, do you ever like Lamb of God at all?
What's that?
Do you ever like Lamb of God at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to admit, I've seen them a couple times, but I have slept on their music. I really couldn't. I know the names of a couple of their albums, but I really couldn't be like, oh yeah, that's like the George Bush song or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And this ties back to the Guns N' Roses show in Vegas. I had heard that I went to April 8th, 2016. They played 2 nights, 8th and 9th. I could only go for the 8th. So the 9th, I had heard that Axl stayed at Four Seasons at the top of Mandalay Bay.
Okay.
So I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go over to Four Seasons. And I know there's a bar over there because I researched it. I'm like, I'm just going to go over there. He's got to come out at some point, So I'm like, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to hang out, right? Knowing that I couldn't go to the show, the next stop for me was the airport and everything. But I'm like, they're going to play in a couple hours. And so I'm going to hang out in Four Seasons. Okay. So I'm there and I'm dressed. I got my leather jacket on. I mean, I look that night like I look now and everything. And this guy, the Four Seasons is like it's a bar, and there's this like staircase across from the bar. This really elegant looking spiral staircase. And this guy comes down the stairs, and he's definitely somebody, right? Like I don't know who he is, but he's clearly like he's somebody, right? And he's looking at me, and I can tell, like if I could read his thoughts telepathically, I know exactly what was going on in his head. He's thinking, oh shit, this kid's gonna come up to me, he's gonna I don't know, ask me for my autograph or something like that. And he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, who is that? I'm like, I've seen his face before. I know that's somebody. I just don't know who it is. And he's thinking like any second now, this person's gonna get up and ask me for a picture or something like that. And I felt so bad because I didn't know who it was. Well, come to find out, it was Chris Adler.
Okay.
From Lamb of God.
Yeah.
And as soon as I found that out, I was like, oh, that's who that was. They're like a huge band and everything. And it was like, that was Chris Adler and stuff, I was just like, but I felt bad though. Cause
and it's funny. Cause like, when you see a celebrity, right, when you're a teenager, right, and you kind of get that like giddiness to you, and it's like when you're an adult, you kind of understand like privacy and respect space. So we were taking a trip to California, and we happened to be at the airport. It was like a 7:00 flight. We had to get to the airport at like 4:30 in the morning, right? And I'm walking by, and we connect eyes, right? And I'm looking right at this guy. He's got the tattoo on his face. He's got the long hair. Well, it was what's his name from Korn, the guitarist.
Oh wow!
Not Monkey Head. So it was Head, right?
Wow.
And he's standing there. He's a little guy, right? He's kind of got his dreads, and he's kind of got the hoodie. And I recognize the tattoo on his face because he's got the cross with the thing, right? So I nodded at him, and he nodded at me. And I was like, listen, I don't want to bug you. I'm like, I appreciate your music and everything like that. He's like, oh man, I thank you, And it was just one of those things where it was like, if that was the 21-year-old me, I'd be like, let's get a picture. Like, let's go to the bar. I'll buy you a drink, right? But as an adult, you kind of just respect, like, he's just standing there with a tote bag and a carry-on. And like nobody knew who he was. People were walking past him like no clue. And we locked eyes, and like kind of the same thing. He looked at me and I looked at him. I kind of nodded.
Yeah.
He nodded at me, and I walked past him. I was just like, dude, I was like, I like your music. I'm like, thank you for being an inspiration to a lot of kids. Your band is obviously one of the biggest bands in the world. And he's like, man, I appreciate that. I'm like, I just wanted to say hi. I'm a fan. Just kind of go from there. And he just kind of nodded and nodded back, and that was it, right? So it was just kind of like, you kind of respect now at our age, kind of what they're going through, right? Like, because like I said, at 22-year-old me, I'd have been all over, right? Like, come on, dude, let's go get a picture. Like, let's go, and now you just kind of just respect their space. So
I'm always like, you're right. Cause I'm like that too. Like I will respect famous people's faces, everything. But I cannot deny, I'm still always starstruck. Like
Yeah,
it's
I
so
was too,
bad.
right? And I recognized him. He obviously didn't know who I was. I'm walking through the airport, right? And so I didn't want to say, now, if you're at a concert and you're going to see them and you see them in the crowd, different story, right? You're like, dude, what's going to, like, because that's his environment. You paid to go see him, right? We're at the airport. I didn't pay him. He didn't know who I was, right? We had no bearing on each other. I just happened to recognize him and I knew who it was. And I was like, I didn't want to, like, draw attention to him and be like, oh, but there were literally hundreds of people, if not thousands of people at the airport in the morning, and nobody knew who he was. Like nobody recognized him at all. And I'm like, there has to be other metalheads that know who he is, right? Like,
Yeah.
because he didn't have like his hood up, but he kind of had it like where his braids were, like his dreads were like tucked in to his hair, like they weren't hanging out. But he's got all the tattoos on his face now, right? So like and I knew who he was, and I was just kind of like, I went up to him and I was just like, I appreciate your music and what you've done for the kids of my generation, right? And he like kind of thanked me, but it was just one of those weird things where it was like I could have probably taken a selfie with him and been like, but I just kind of was like, I just respected his privacy at the airport, right? It was just kind of a weird thing. When you see rock stars outside of their environment and you kind of recognize them and you kind of know who they are, but it's like now I think I'm at the age where it's like you do your thing, I do my thing. If I'm at a concert, different story, right? If I pay money to go see you and you're walking around and I meet you backstage or I rub out, like we're taking a picture, right?
Sure, yeah.
But like privacy stuff like that, like I didn't want to draw attention to him, right? Because I don't know what would happen if I would have taken a selfie with him and people would have seen, people might have been like, who is that? And I'm like, oh, it's the guitarist for Korn, right? And they're like, oh, then the next thing you know, he's getting bombarded. But he had no security, no anything. It was just him and his bag.
That's so funny. So the closest like encounter like that I've had was actually it was Vinnie Paul. It was one night I was out in Vegas, just like out there visiting family and stuff, and I'm in Mandalay Bay. It's like 3 a.m, and I'm hanging out in there's this lounge area it's not called Mizuya anymore. Now it's called Rhythm and Riffs, but that's like if I had to pick like Rhythm and Riffs, awesome, chill. I'm sure you've probably seen it before. Anyway, so I'm like just outside of it, like smoking a cigar or something, and I'm looking, I'm like, holy shit, that's Vinnie Paul. Now, like Hell Yeah wasn't playing any dates or anything. He was with I think I'm pretty sure a couple of the guys from Hell Yeah. But I couldn't contain myself. I'm like, I have to go up and
right.
No, yeah, I had to, and like I don't like I value the picture like I value, my cat and everything. I just don't like to show it off a lot because it was I had really short hair at the time, and I just feel like I look like a total dork in it and everything. I look stupid with short hair and stuff. But
that's the thing, right? I would imagine that if I was walking through the airport and I would have saw Phil Anselmo, it would have been a different story, right? Because he's my idol, right? And I've gotten plenty of pictures with him at like concerts, but I would have loved to have had like a couple minutes just to talk to him as a human being and be like, can I get a picture with you, right? That would be completely different, right? Like I like Korn, but I'm not a huge Korn fan.
Sure.
Right? So I knew who he was. I appreciate the music, but like if I saw Rob Zombie at the airport, you bet your ass I'm like, dude, let's go, right? Let's get a picture, right? But it's just kind of, it's just, again, it's the respect of privacy thing. But at that point, if it's somebody that like I'm like, a fan of, right?
Yeah.
And like follow their music and their movies and all, like, yeah, I'm gonna be like, all right, let's snap one real quick, right?
So, you have to, yeah, of course.
So yeah, so that's kind of cool. And then the other thing too, with a lot of these like musicians and stuff like that, I've noticed now, a lot of them I think need that kind of like personal connection with the crowds, because I've seen a lot of them now, especially like a couple bigger bands after the show, they're like, meet us at the merchandise booths, come shake our hands, we'll take pictures with you, right? And it's just kind of a cool thing, because back in the day it was always like, oh, thank you, good night Chicago, we'll see you soon, back to the bus, on it, no, like they didn't want to be bothered. And now they kind of just are like, what, come take a picture, say hi, right? So Jackal's always been like that, right? I don't know if you've seen
Jackal. They're from Chicago. They're a Chicago band, are they?
No, Jackal's from Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they always play Chicago though, right? They play at least 5 shows in the Chicagoland area every year, and they're awesome. But they're one of the few bands that will literally take every fan, sign stuff, take pictures. They don't charge for anything, but it's just kind of a cool thing. And I think a lot of more bands now are doing that. A lot more bands, I should say, are doing that now. They're kind of taking the personal approach where like they know they need you to keep funding their careers. So
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
it's like, let's just play and jet. It's like, let's hang out. Let's, not that they're going to get to know everybody,
Sure.
but it just goes a long way to shake somebody's hand and be like, oh, you played great tonight. Can I get a picture? Sure. Can you sign my thing? Sure. Right. Like, I think it's becoming like that way again now, which is kind of neat to see.
I had a sort of an opposite experience. You brought up Trans Siberian Orchestra before. 2015, at Trans Siberian Orchestra, and me and like my girlfriend at the time. Show's over. It's at the Boston Garden, or
Okay.
He's in Boston, right? Where the Celtics play and all that. And right across from the arena is this like really nice like burger joint, right? Very, very good and stuff like that. So, we see Trans Siberian, we go across the street to this burger place. A couple of these guys from like the financial district that they had to have been from I forget the name of the famous like road street in Boston where all like the like bankers are and
Yeah.
stuff like that. They're there. Couple of them, they come up to me like, "Hey man, great show. That was awesome." and I kind of
Right.
look at my girlfriend. I'm like, "Just go with it. Just go with it," type of
Yeah.
thing, And it was just, I don't know. It was so
Right.
funny.
Yeah.
It's like I was just there as a fan, like
Yeah.
they were and stuff, But they mistook me for somebody in the band. And stuff,
Right. Yeah.
It was funny. It was funny.
Yeah, it's kind of cool, right? And things like that happen, right? They know the show's in town. They have no idea who it is, right? They're, and Trans Siberian Orchestra is kind of like a cool thing because like they're one of the first like unique bands that like transcend like people that don't like metal but like Christmas will listen to them, right? Everyone's seen
Right.
Home Alone. They know the music, they know the stuff, so it's kind of cool to see them like in that environment because I loved them as Sabotage, right? When they were first out, like. Edge of Thorns was one of my favorite CDs as a kid, right?
They most of Sabotage. Is that how? Is that
I
like?
think four of the five members of Sabotage are in Trans Siberian Orchestra.
Oh, so it was like
Yeah.
John Oliver.
Yeah. The one brother passed away. The drummer, the singer, and the guitarist were all in Trans Siberian Orchestra.
Okay.
I think
Chris
like
Caffery,
the
is he
bassist.
another one?
Yeah, I think the
Okay.
bassist might have been, and then at one point, like John Petrucci was in the band. They had that one bassist that ended up passing away from the bus accident. He was in Z-Rock with the TV show. He was really awesome. That he was a cool dude.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Shit.
that was and it was just kind of I recognized him right away because I love that show Z-Rock. I don't know if you ever saw that.
It's like local to your area, right? Wasn't it?
Well,
Z-Rock?
no, it was nationally syndicated,
Oh,
but
okay,
it
okay.
was two brothers and a friend that were in the band, and it was like kind of like a Spinal Tap, but the band is called ZO2, and they are awesome. If you ever get a chance to listen to ZO2, but in the show, they're like a kid band. They play at birthday parties, right? And they sing like these acoustic songs, and that night they're rock stars. So they're trying to find the balance. Like Joan Rivers is like in the show, her nephew is like the manager of the band, and she's kind of got like it's a fun show. But the brother in that was the guy that passed away from Trans Siberian Orchestra, and he was awesome.
Oh shit.
So the show only lasted like 2 years, but it was funny. That Big J Ostranik, the comedian, was the band manager, and he kind of in this show he always he played like he wasn't gay, but he acted like he was.
Okay.
So he would always have like these gay sexual innuendos towards the band. But it was funny. It was a great show. Like it was awesome.
Yeah.
But that's like one of my favorite rock star shows, by the way. That was
awesome. That's awesome.
It was called Z-Rock, and then John Popper was in it from.
Oh wow!
And they'd have, and that's actually where Steel Panther got their like notoriety because they were having a battle of the bands, and it was them versus Steel Panther.
Oh my god!
And that was how. So it was really cool. If you ever like, you can YouTube it and see. Yeah. But it was called Z-Rock was the name of the show, and
I've definitely like heard people talking about that. I've seen it mentioned before. So
yeah,
now,
it was funny.
That's funny. Now you get the full story.
Yeah, so that was it. But yeah, so he was in the band. Just a lot of different people had kind of come through, and now it's a staple of Christmas, right? People pay tons of money to go and see it, which is, I mean, it's spectacular. You've seen it, so
yeah.
The show is great. I love it. So
Yeah. Oh man, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So man, then to wrap it up, I know we're kind of letting this go here, and I didn't really even get into the meat and potatoes of you and like how
Oh,
we met and stuff like that. Yeah. So like
you pretty much
so
got it. I mean, if it's like
right.
this, there you
I mean,
go.
but that's how like real quick, like we'll do this. We'll definitely have you on again, and we'll kind of talk. But like how we met was really cool. Spew posted a post on TikTok about Chris Barnes, right? Obviously, I was a Cannibal Corpse fan, 6 Feet Under fan, right? So he's talking about how he was trying to interview Chris Barnes, and I was intrigued by it. And you kind of got that awesome personality when you're like,
Oh, thank
on
you.
TikTok, right? You're just kind of, I was drawn to you, and I'm like, I like how this guy is, right? Like he's totally excited to tell the story about Chris
Thank
Barnes.
you.
So now I'm listening to it, right? And I'm like, all right, so does Chris do the interview? Does he not? He got sick or whatever. And so the three, probably 2.5 minute clip was you telling the story about how you actually got to do the interview with Chris Barnes. So I reached out and I was like, this is awesome, right? So that's kind of how we met. So, when we do the second part of this, because there's still a lot to talk about, but like I kind of want to get into how you got into interviewing bands and how that, like how you pursued that. Cause like, how I got into podcasting was a little bit unique too. So I'd like to hear your story on how you got into doing this now and doing that. So, we'll definitely do a part 2 of this, right? We're definitely excited to talk to you. But yeah, so just to give everybody kind of a rundown of how we met, I usually try to find people on social media that like kind of have a good story behind them. And so when I landed on your page just randomly on the FYP, I was like, this dude's awesome. I was like, this is great.
Thank you so much. Likewise,
so,
likewise.
So that's how that started. So that's why I was like, I started watching all your clips, and they're all awesome, right? All the bands you've had on and all the musicians you've talked to and interviewed, right? So like we'll definitely get into that next time about how you got into that side of things.
Well, thank you so very much. There's oh man, I'm trying to think of how I can. I'm supposed to go down south in March for something like kind of similar and everything. It's like I tell you offline, so I don't know how much they want to like beforehand and stuff like that. But yeah, something that should be like a unique interview coming up in March and stuff. And I still have yet to know the full like details and everything.
Yeah, so I'm that same way. So right. So I think we talked about this real quick before about Matt Zane, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
So Matt's getting into huge trouble now, right? Like so I don't know if you know the backstory, but him and Wayne Static were friends before he passed away. Matt was in his band. They wrote a bunch of music together. They recorded a bunch of music together. He owns the rights to the music. He wants to make a documentary about Wayne Static and Tara Ray, and the family of Wayne Static is suing him.
Oh, he's behind that? I read about that.
Yeah, so he is the guy behind that. So Matt Zane he says, I am making this no matter what. You can sue me. I don't have anything left. Sue me for what you want. I'm making this not. So I told him when the documentary's done, I want you to come back on my podcast and talk about it, because right before we kind of broke, he's like, I got something coming up. I don't want to tell everybody about it now, but in a few months, you'll see what I'm talking about. And that was the announcement that he was going to go ahead and make this. So Tara Ray's family sued him or is in the process of suing him. They put a cease and desist from Wayne Static's family, and he says, I don't care what you do, I'm making this. So he's going, so he dropped his balls on this really hard. So it's kind
damn.
And Matt was like one of my more controversial guests, but like now I want to have him back on. So that's kind of like where I was going.
You have to.
So,
you have to.
Yeah. So now it's kind of like I want to get him back to, when he's done with this documentary and tells a story about him and Wayne Static and the whole thing, right? Because I don't know what's going to happen with Static X now, because obviously Edsel Dope's doing the Wayne Static robot, right? So it's just kind of interesting to see what Matt's going to say about it now, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure he's going to go into all the stuff, because he said towards the end, the Static X guys didn't really have anything to do with him when he was doing the last Wayne Static solo album. That was Matt produced that and wrote a lot of the songs on it. And they were actually about to put out another album before he OD'd.
Wow. See, that right there is, I think, like a testament to the wildness that exists in rock music, because I know I really don't know many Static X songs, but I like in just hearing that little trailer that you provided. I want to see like the documentary. Like that's
Yeah,
incredibly
that's
intriguing to me now. You
yeah.
know,
And
like
so right, and so the thing is that like Matt was in the adult world, and Wayne Static married Tara Ray, who was a porn star,
oh
right? So
yeah,
he got into that adult world because of Tara Ray, right? So Tara Ray gets out of the adult world and goes into the music world. So she becomes Wayne Static's like manager, business partner. So she used all her money from her porn years to support Wayne Static. And Matt
oh
and Wayne become friends. So Static X is now not in the picture, right? Tony and the rest of the guys in the band. It was Matt and Tara and Wayne for the last 3 years of their like life, because they both died tragically. Wayne first, and then she OD'd as well. But he was the one that spent the majority of the time with them in their last years, getting to know them and like making music together. And like, so she left the adult industry for Wayne Static.
oh my, is that how he passed? It was an
Yeah, OD.
overdose.
Yeah,
Ah, what a shame. That's
yeah.
shame. And her too, I guess, right?
And then she followed the same path they were on. And Matt, talks about it, and I'm sure the documentary is going to touch on that. But I think he wants to show them in the light of like that, two people found each other and they were soulmates. And Wayne didn't care about the background of her. She left that world for him. It was just kind of like a Romeo and Juliet story.
Yeah.
Right. And Matt's
How
trying to tell
sad.
it. So it's
How sad. Yeah.
yeah.
Damn.
So
Damn. Yeah, no, I thank you very, very
yeah. So
much for letting me
yeah.
spew.
Right. So here we'll do this. Before we end it, tell everybody where they could find you. I'll plug this up later. I'll do some editing and I'll post it to YouTube. I'll share the link with you. But tell everybody watching this where they could find you at, and then I'll link all of your stuff in the description of the video. That way, people that see me can now follow you.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, Concrete Spew on YouTube. I mean, I got, on Instagram with the same
Okay.
name, but the majority, well, yeah, really the life blood of what I do is like YouTube and stuff.
So mine
Yeah,
too,
Concrete
right?
Spew.
So all my videos all get loaded up to YouTube. I use TikTok as networking. Obviously, I post some stuff on there, but I usually use TikTok to network, Instagram and Facebook kind of for like promotion, and then YouTube is where all my stuff lives. So, and I feel you on YouTube, because that's where longevity is going to last on YouTube.
Yeah, I started TikTok kind of for the same reasons as you, as like just like just marketing and stuff like that. But it's become more like just fun now.
Yeah, and I'll
Like,
tell you what, there
what I
are a
mean?
lot of bands on TikTok where I love the ones that come on my FYP page that say, "Would you follow a band that has less than 200 followers on Spotify and only got 150 listens, and it's this awesome hardcore band?" And I'll like their stuff and I'll link it and be like, "Dude, come on my podcast and talk about your." I've gotten several bands like that now,
Oh,
where
that's
like I
awesome.
love following those FYP ones because they're really good bands. But they're
Yeah.
like, would you listen to a band that only has less than 100 followers on Spotify and only had 67 views last month or 67 listens, and it's some insane, awesome band?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Why
love
not? Yeah.
reaching out to those guys. So yeah, so that's where I use TikTok as shines in that
Oh,
regard.
good.
So yeah. So, well, thanks again for being a guest on my podcast. I appreciate you taking the time. I'll definitely have you on. Maybe we'll plan for like next month or the month after, or maybe after this March thing, we can get you back on. You can drop you kind of left us with a little spoiler of what's going
Yeah.
on, but maybe after it happens, come back and talk about it. And then we'll get into how you started and your journey through this musical stuff that you got going on.
I would be delighted. I would be
Awesome.
delighted. Absolutely delighted.
Cool. So we'll keep in touch. We'll go from there. So guys, I'm the One Fun Guy podcast. This is Concrete Spew. I'll link up all his stuff, all his videos, all his band interviews. They're great. They're fantastic. So follow him, and we will do this again then in a few months.
Awesome. Sounds
All right.
good,
Take
Mark.
care, everybody. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Take care, man.